Welcome to Startup Grind Detroit. I'm Faris, Alami, your host, and delighted to have with us a guest. This is awesome to have you here, Sergio Rodriguez, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. Thanks for making time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to do this.
Well, as you know, Sergio, this is Startup Grind is a nice platform for us to have a side conversation. And my goal today is to really just highlight some of your journey as an entrepreneur and what you've done and where you've been. And maybe you could tell people first, what is it that you do? What does Sergio Intiduli do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of Tiduli. Tiduli is an evolution of my personal experience. When I moved to the US, I was 12 years old. And a lot of the work that I did as a teen to make money was manual labor, particularly in the suburbs, in the area where I grew up. Things like raking leaves, pulling weeds, setting mulch. Then I went to college. I studied biomedical physics, and I paid my way through university doing this same type of work. So throughout, that journey of, high school and then paying for my education, doing this work, I started to mold this idea in my mind. And at the time, it didn't have a name, like it wasn't called Tiduli. It was just simply a tool to actually make my life easier so that I could clock into a client's house, invoice in seconds and get paid on the same day. So same as just like getting paid in cash, but entirely electronic. And then that idea obviously continued to get more and more ambitious. And now our vision is to build the largest professional development pipeline in the United States. And like, obviously, like I can dive into that and like, we can go any direction in regards to like the vision and how we plan to get there. But now in terms of the what, Tiduli is the easiest way to hire young adults from your metropolitan area to come to your house and help you with unskilled house chores like raking leaves, pulling weeds, setting mulch, moving patio furniture, essentially things that don't require professional training to do.
Thank you so much for that. I was lucky to initially meet you when you're getting started evolving this idea. So maybe you could walk us through the evolution of where you are, because I want to get to the whole app where you are today with the app and the funding that you've raised. But I'd love to hear first some of your grind in the journey of getting there, whether it's the customer discovery or getting enough work or getting people, whatever that is, just maybe in an initial days of you developing it. And when you first, how old is the company now?
Yeah, so we're coming up into the 5th year of like working on the company, but I would say full time. Post fundraise, a little bit less than 3 years. So the first 2 years we were bootstrapping, and I was developing the idea on the side. When I met you, we were going through the DTX launch program at TechTown, and I was still a full-time student, right? So that was the official summer when we decided we wanted to give this idea a try. But it took us a little bit over 2 years to actually raise our first round of financing so that I could go full-time. And the following year after that, we got into the Techstars program. And since then, we've been operating very, very diligently and working really hard, right? Like the progress we've made in the last couple of years has been significantly greater than the progress we made the first 3 years, right? So it definitely compounds on itself. But yeah, I would say the journey probably, if it didn't start in 2017, it probably started in 2008, when I was a teen, like doing all of this work. So it's really relative to determine when I actually started building the company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I always tell people what looks like overnight success for the fundraising or whatever you're doing is probably a journey of usually 5 to 10 years of grind. People just don't. Sometimes you're. I feel, Sergio, you're mature enough to recognize that, but sometimes some of the entrepreneurs might not reflect back to say, "What actually the idea came when I did this, but it took years to. I'm going to call it to incubate within your mind."
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, because our industry is incredibly fragmented. There are thousands of businesses that are doing similar things, and everyone is taking a different approach based on their own personal biases and their experiences, right? What makes me unique and what has helped our company raise financing, particularly from top-tier venture capitalists, is what they call the founder market fit, right? Is this idea that, hey, Sergio doesn't fit the typical profile of what we look for when we are doing venture financing. He's not an Ivy League graduate who grew up in a bunch of privilege, right? And normally that tends to be like when VCs pattern match, they're looking for the next Mark Zuckerberg, right? They have like a very specific type of profile or person that they like to invest in. And really recently, as in the last 5 years, really, we've seen an emphasis put on underrepresented founders in their unique experience that they're able to bring, to the table to essentially see and spot opportunities that other people may have missed. So even though the gig economy is not new, right? What I knew the gig economy to be before Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit, all these companies, to me, that was just working under the table, right? Like babysitting, pulling weeds. That stuff isn't new. That has been around for hundreds of years, right? Like that type of work. The real innovation in 2008, 2009 was the iPhone and mobile apps, right? And that brought a whole new level of how we do work and how we connect with people. And now, this is actually a pretty exciting time, even though we're going through an economic recession potentially. We're going to see new gig companies, what I call the gig economy 2.0, that are going to be born out of this recession and out of what LinkedIn is calling the big reshuffling of people leaving their jobs or like massive layoffs and people looking for temporary employment, diving into the gig economy, young people looking for formative work experience. So there's a lot of opportunity now for gig businesses or labor-focused businesses to actually thrive in this type of economic environment.
That's very cool, actually, Sergio. Yeah, I mean, when you frame it that way, it's very interesting to see how the iPhone or the smartphones in general have changed and modified how we view things. And unfortunately, and fortunately at the same time, the demand of now became much, I'm not going to wait for another day. I'm not going to wait for another minute. I need something now that could potentially, empower your kind of work actually in so many ways. I'm curious, when I go back to something you said, which I think is really important and our listeners here and viewers would be very interested in hearing about, is the whole journey of fundraising, especially being a minority, immigrant, entrepreneur. And I know you face all kinds of other challenges, Sergio, that that for you to get there. So I would love to maybe just shed a light on the grind and the journey that you've taken to be here and to be able to do what you're doing and what you care for.
Yeah, absolutely. So like my perspective is that fundraising or just starting a business, running a business, scaling a business in general is very, very difficult. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you were born, who you were born to. It is going to be a grind. It is going to be difficult, regardless of how many resources you have. But what I would say about being an underrepresented founder is looking at that as a strength and not as a weakness. I think what a lot of underrepresented founders, Latino, Black, women CEOs, what we tend to do a lot is we tend to put ourselves in sort of in this box where we say, hey, we are at a disadvantage, right? When I think the winning formula is to say, hey, we're in a unique position. We're able to see opportunities that other people don't see. So if you're able to see, I guess your background, right, as a strength, not as a weakness, and to say like, hey, look, I'm the person who is better suited to scale this business because not only do I have the technical experience and the know-how, I have lived through this business. Like I know exactly how it works. I know the ins and outs. So yeah, you could finance, the recent computer science Harvard graduate, and they may be really good at building an app, but nobody knows how to pull weeds better than I do, right? So there's definitely an argument to be made about the opportunity, that we have right now as underrepresented founders to pull together that insight and combine it with, tech savviness, top tier investors, and actually like build massive companies.
I'm curious, how many venture capitals did you pitch?
Oh man, I mean, since the beginning of the company, I have likely talked to over 300 institutional investors. I would say, so I have raised money. I've raised money 2 times. So
Okay.
some would say like 2.5 times because we went through an accelerator program, and some people would consider that an investor. They are an investor, right? And the terms were different. So we have raised money under 3 different types of terms. We raised a smaller pre-seed, Then we went to the Techstars program, and then we raised now what we're calling a larger pre-seed because rounds have actually gotten bigger. So some people call it a seed. It depends. A lot of it is just it's relative to where you are and your industry. But I would say probably over 300 institutional investors to be able to raise what is in total $2.7 million in pre-seed financing.
That's amazing. I mean, and you cut off for a second. How many millions did you say?
So in total, up to date, at $2.7 million in pre-seed financing. The last round we did was in November of last year for $1.5 million.
That's amazing. That's congratulations on that. That's not a small task.
It's not, but something that I have to remind myself of is that raising money is actually not an achievement. I mean, for somebody like me with my background, it's an achievement in the sense that like not a lot of people were willing to bet on my ability to actually pull that off, right? But in the grand scheme of things, fundraising is one of my core responsibilities as a CEO. So I really have two jobs. Like one of them is to attract and retain great talent, and then the other one is to keep money in the bank. So I'm doing my job, right? And the better I do it, the better off the company is going to be. But the real challenge for us is, how do we grow faster, right? How do we find product market fit? How do we delight our customers? So like those are things that I believe a lot of early stage founders, they put a lot of emphasis on raising money when there's some really awesome companies that don't need to raise a dime, right? So measuring your success based on how much money you raise is just not a good metric from my perspective of success, because that money will run out and then you have to go out again, and then you have to talk to 130 people and do that whole thing. If you can figure out a way to build a company without raising a single dollar from venture capital, that's even better, right? Like, I mean, that's my perspective.
Sure. I also feel the best money to be raised is from your customers.
Oh yeah, 100%. They're the best investors. It's non-dilutive. It's great. Yeah.
But occasionally, unfortunately, in your case, building an app and doing some of the stuff, you probably could have done it. It just would have taken you a lot longer.
Right. Correct. And we really wanted to be, myself and my co-founders, we really wanted to be able to be full-time on this so that we could do this. Like the argument is with venture capital, you can achieve things in a faster way and in a bigger way, right? So that's the pitch as to why you take venture capital. And we have very much seen that, right? The progress we have made in the last 2 years via the partnerships that we have had with our investors has been, very significant. And it's something that it would have been a lot harder to do if I had a full-time job that wasn't working for my company. So there's definitely, they're good to it, right? But having said that, it is still good for entrepreneurs to continue to prioritize their unit economics and to figure out the best way to be profitable, if not break even, like on their own. Because in times like this, right, like with a potential recession coming, when money dries up, that's actually where those things really come into play and when they really matter.
Yeah, well, but I want to bring something up, Sergio. I think it's important here. It's not about just you doing it full time, because I have a feeling you were working 40, 60 hours in the business period before. The difference now is you probably are able to pay you at least some decent wage to live. You're not rich, you're not going to get rich out of it, but at least you're not having to worry about your rent or your mortgage or your car or your food. And that usually allows you to shift, I usually say, the thoughts from a survivor mode, take what you can get, to a growth mode where strategically you have the time and the bandwidth to plan for the future. It's not right or wrong, this is better or this is worse or anything like that, but it's just a different way to look at the business when you are having a backup. The second thing I will say is my experience with entrepreneurs, when you get funding in that kind of capacity, it actually does a couple of things for you. One, boost your morale, that there's a validation in the marketplace that you want. Now, the process to get there is very painful, because talking to 300 people to get, the 1 or 2 or 3 that invested clearly is a very painful process, and the morale in that meantime, maybe you're going down. But once you get the 1 or 2 or the 3 or 4 that invested, clearly it changes the way you look at things. And also, to your point, opens up new doors that you didn't even know that existed.
Correct.
It opens up new markets you didn't even know that existed. And those things, although you could do it yourself, that network comes with its own in a way. And as you know, relationships building takes years, not days. So, you might get like occasionally and bond with someone really quick, but generally speaking, it takes years for you to bond with someone where you could feel you trust them and you could feel you could do something with them.
Yeah, so I guess two things. I'll respond to the first and then the second point that you made. So in terms of the first point, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I have made as an entrepreneur, an early stage founder or first time founder, is actually not paying myself enough. And I have corrected that mistake. And the reason why at the beginning, as a first time founder, especially a young founder, you have this in mind and the idea of grinding, like the grind. What is the grind? There's this misconception that you need to be miserable throughout the grind. And that is not true. That is actually bad for your business. So if you're racking up debt, if you're struggling to make rent, if you don't know where the next meal is going to come from, you're not putting that time and energy into actually building your business. And a VC, a venture capitalist, an investor, they want to know that you're spending all of your time and energy and focus solving the company's problems, right? So if you have personal problems, those personal problems will directly affect your ability to execute as a CEO. So I think when we first raised, we didn't raise a significant amount. Our first round was 425,000, which was enough to pay. I was paying myself about $35,000 a year. And, it was, for me as a young person in my mid-20s, it was more than I've ever made at the time because I was just coming out of school. But I didn't anticipate how much more I would actually need based on the quality of life that I needed to have. Like I needed to be able to do things with my family and pay for rent and all these different things that begin to happen when you become an adult, right? So I just didn't plan well for that. I corrected that mistake when we raised the last round. We gave ourselves a healthy compensation boost, and it is a night and day difference. Just like being able to focus solely on the business, it does make a difference. So that's point one. Point two, in terms of investors and partnerships, what good investors bring to the table is not just cash, right? So the money it's great, but it does run out. It's also their Rolodex, is their network, is being able to refer a good engineer when you need to hire an engineer to build your platform, take it to the next level. So good investors are not just cash investors. They will bring expertise. They will bring connections, right? They will be able to your point, to open doors that you didn't even know existed. So we have been very privileged to get very good investors, like people who really care, who are experts on our cap table. And even though, we talked to over 300 people, as it sounds, part of the reason why we talked to so many people too, and some founders should know this, is we were also picky ourselves, right? There were people that actually wanted to invest in the round, and we decided, hey, we would much rather work with this person versus this person. So even though 95% of the conversations led to a no, within the 5% that led to a yes, then it came down to us to decide who we actually wanted to work with. And that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot.
No, I appreciate you saying that, Sergio. One of the things, when we're talking about fundraising, I usually like to elevate the question of, is it the right person, the right time, for the right amount, with the right industry, with the right network? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no to any of them, not saying you shouldn't do it, just evaluate it, because sure, I might give you the cash, but I'm not in the right network, or I might give you the cash, but it's the wrong amount. And now you have to go back and ask for it again, or it's too much that you don't need it at this moment, or whatever else in between. Mm-hmm. If it's the wrong timing, could be also a bad thing for all. So there are lots of factors that needs to go into the ask as well as the receiving of it. And I appreciate that you brought up this point of, there might have been investors that wanted to give us money, and we said, not at this time, or not now. And that's very powerful. Now, I'm curious, with having partners, and that's got to be a healthy discussion between the partners to try to figure out, do we take it, do we not take it, or do you feel like you've always have aligned as a group of partners?
So my co-founders, they trust me, which is it's at the core of a good, healthy relationship, right? Whether it is your spouse or a best friend or your business partners, Trust has to be, at the forefront of that relationship. And when I make a decision, whether or not they question it, there is trust. So whenever I say no to money, it always takes my partners as a surprise, because the narrative internally is we need more money so we can do more things. So when suddenly I make a decision that is opposed to, it is contrarian to what we are looking to do, I obviously need to have a really good explanation for it. And at the end of the day, they do trust that I make the best decisions, but they've definitely been nervous before when we've really been tight for cash and we have an offer at the table and I've actually refused to take it. It's always a difficult conversation to have, but what I can say is historically it has always paid off. Like I have never regretted not taking someone's money, if that makes sense.
Sure. So, Sergio, I want to shift it just for a minute before we come to closure here soon. My shift is I want to take you to is this app that you've developed. I'm sure it's been a journey, and it's sure it's not maybe as you imagine it. Maybe it is better, maybe it's worse. I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts about developing the app and how you got here now, and where do you want to see the app go?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I think of mobile apps is the same way that that people were likely thinking of the World Wide Web in the early 2000s. It's mobile apps for the most part are inevitable, and there's something that now it's becoming part of the norm. So the mobile app is not really the innovation of our business. The product that we sell is on-demand, unskilled services. Like that is actually our product. And a good outcome, a happy client, is somebody who has their to-do doer show up at their home, like at the right place, at the right time for the right job. That is a good experience. All the app really does is it helps us facilitate that experience and that exchange of services and money. That's all really that the app is actually is what it does and what it's meant to do. Having said that, though, in terms of the vision for the product, the technology is supposed to help us scale. It's supposed to do that better than we can currently do it now. And it's supposed to streamline a lot of the logistics that happen because of being human, right? So there are a lot of things that we are trying to anticipate or we're trying to account for. If somebody's running late to a job, maybe the app knows their GPS location, they send a notification to the client. And that's what the app is really meant to do. It's supposed to make the experience better, but the product is not the app.
Got it. Love that. So the app, and the reason I bring this up, because the app seems to be this app store. If I search anything, it used to be like maybe 5 or 10 things. Now, if I search anything, they're like 5 or 10 pages.
Yeah.
How are you fighting through this, I'm going to call it noise, for you to show up and be able to get the traction that you need?
Yeah. So again, the main point here is when smartphones first came out, you could release a game for the smartphone and it would go viral because there weren't that many games, right? And now that there are millions of games in the app stores, you can't just be a good game. You have to be extraordinary. And when it comes down to platforms like ours that are enabling services, it's about the service. The app doesn't need to be a beautiful app, right? You could spend a lot of money and resources and time and building a beautifully designed app that has a bunch of bells and whistles. But then if the service that you are delivering at the end of the transaction is not good enough, the app doesn't actually matter. So my advice to founders who are looking to build an app as a potential like $1 million or $1 billion company is really focus on the pain point and the problem you're solving and the value proposition. Because if you don't get that right, it doesn't matter how pretty your app is, how bulky it is. Like that doesn't actually matter. The only thing that matters is that the problem you're solving is actually worth solving.
Cool. Yeah, Sergio, clearly we can keep here for all day to asking you all these questions. And I appreciate you making the time to share with us your insights about your journey of developing an app and raising funds in such times. If you want to leave with any final remarks, I'm going to leave it up to you. I'm going to ask you the question of, what would you tell Sergio today if you could? And I know it's hard because looking back, about 5, 7, 10, years ago, what you know today is not what you knew then, and it's not possible to know. But what would you tell yourself then? if you were to advise someone?
So if I were to give myself advice when I first started this business, the first thing I would say is buckle up. And then the second thing I would say to myself is trust your instinct, but be highly skeptical of, essentially everything else around you. I believe there are many times in my company where I have questioned my instinct because I'm talking to somebody who is more senior than I am or who is more expert than I am. And after several months, ended up realizing that I was actually right. And just like really having conviction in that your instincts, they come from somewhere, right? Your gut feeling, it's built out of experiences and out of insight, and that you are the expert in your industry. So that's one, just trust your instinct, but then also be highly skeptical of everything else that you hear, and also be highly skeptical of yourself. So you want to trust your instinct, but you also want to make sure that you're reading, you're informing yourself, you're having conversations, and you're giving yourself context so that you can make the best decisions that you can.
That's great. That's great, Sergio. Yeah, I blogged about this a couple of times. I call it never doubt, always question. Meaning don't doubt your ability and skills, but always question it. And anytime anyone tells me that they're an expert, I think, all right, so you know something that is obsolete because you probably knew something at one point, but things are always changing.
Yeah.
So for me, you got to approach life being a student, learning all the time. I think we have a much better results because, to your point, your own experience is completely different than anyone else's, and the way you're thinking about something and how you bring it together completely different. Sergio, it's been a pleasure as usual. Honor to have you here. Thank you for making the time. I can wish you the best of continuous success, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm your host, Faris Alami. This is Startup Grind Detroit.